Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Kelly. I am Melton City Council's Sustainability Officer, and tonight I represent the Western Alliance for Greenhouse Action, who has been working with Renew to put this series of events on. This year is a great time to take steps towards making our homes and lifestyles more sustainable, but it's really hard to get trusted independent advice. So we've enlisted Renew and some guest speakers to help us through this journey together. And tonight's topic is going to be around creating the all-electric home and working through the term electrification. We've seen lots of different modelling that predicts that all-electric households will be in a much better position financially, and from the bill shocks that we know are coming, between now and even sort of 2030. And some of the modelling has predicted that, these homes will be from $1,000 to potentially a couple of $1,000 better off, even without solar and batteries. So our guest speaker tonight is going to speak to all of those things. The event tonight is going to run for 90 minutes, and that includes 30 minutes of question and answer time at the end. So, yeah, welcome. I would like to start by acknowledging that where I sit here is Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to pay my respects to our elders from both where I'm sitting tonight and from where everybody else is tuning in from. I really respect that the custodians of the land previously and even today play a really important part in how we learn to heal the land as well. So I wanted to acknowledge that this evening. A couple of housekeeping things. Tonight's webinar is going to be recorded so that the attendees that you guys that are joining us tonight will get a follow-up email with a link to the recording if you want to play it back and have another listen. And then otherwise it'll be available on the Renew YouTube channel. So tonight, let me introduce Dean Lombard. Dean Lombard's a former social worker. He's an energy specialist who's worked on lots of issues such as energy efficiency, fuel choice, consumer protections, hardship assistance, and lots of community energy projects. Hi, Dean, there you are. And let's see if my computer's still going to behave with you here as well. He's interested in helping people and communities take control of their energy needs and make the system work for them. That's a lot in your bucket, Dean.
I do my best.
You do your best. Well, I'm going to leave you there, and we'll touch base at the end for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks everyone for having me. I really enjoy having these conversations with people and sharing some information and answering questions about these really important and sometimes slightly complicated issues that are usually a bit less complicated once we've had a bit of a chat and shared some information. I'm coming to you from Bunurong and Wurundjeri country in West Footscray. And yeah, as Kelly mentioned, got questions for me that we'll do at the end, put them in the Q&A. The chat function is more for like chatting among yourselves, for example. I'll kick off. As Kelly said, we're going to try and leave about half an hour for questions. So I'll go through my presentation first, save up your questions, and then we'll do them at the end. Where's my little thing? So I'm in a different place. There it is today. So yeah, all electric homes, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a bit of background on types of fuels used for home appliances in the first place, because in some ways all electric homes is a bit of back to the future. We're going to look at the cost issues, the emissions issues, how the appliances are different, and then we're going to go through some steps about, if you want to head towards being an all electric home, how would you do that? So yeah, to start with, it is interesting to go through a bit of history because all electric homes were a big innovation in like the 1950s. Before that, people used, heating oil, kerosene, a whole lot of dirty types of fuels that you had to burn to heat and to cook. And statewide provisioning of electricity really changed that. And there was a big push to move off those dirty, unsafe fuels onto clean, cheap electricity. Because electricity, was all government provided. Government did, built the coal mines, did the generation. It was all done for the benefit of the people. It was cheap and it was safe. And it was a big social change. Toward the late 1960s, when we started drilling for oil in Bass Strait, there was this huge byproduct issue, methane gas, that was a byproduct of oil drilling. And the idea was generated to, look, why don't we sell the methane? It's a useful fuel. And again, a lot of government ownership involved. And it's like, how do we benefit the state? And they basically started, selling off methane as a household and industrial fuel. And government invested in pipe distribution systems. And this is one reason why there's much more gas in Victoria than other states as a household fuel, because there was lots of oil drilling in Victoria, and this methane was basically, the gas was free. They just had to get it somewhere to be used. Otherwise they had to work out how to dispose of it. So that's how we landed in the world that a lot of us live in now, where we just expect to have gas on tap as well as electricity. And really from the 1970s until about like 10, 15 years ago, gas was very cheap, because again, it was just this byproduct. And this led to what became pretty much the norm in urban areas in Victoria, which is dual fuel households, where you use gas for heating and cooking and increasingly hot water, and you use electricity for other things. And in particular, like whole house ducted heating really sort of developed during the 70s and 80s to become pretty standard. And it's, it heats the whole house. It does burn a lot of gas, but again, gas was cheap. You were warm. You weren't paying that much. It was pretty cool. Pardon the reverse pun. And look, there were lots of government programs to encourage people to switch to gas appliances. Was seen as a future. They were much cheaper to run than the equivalent electric appliances, and they worked better because the electrical appliances didn't work that well. Especially, you remember the old-fashioned sort of electric cooktops were pretty useless for cooking on, for example. Look, things are changing now because those oil wells are drying up, and gas is now much more expensive because it's much harder to get those last bits out, and a lot more gas comes from coal seams or fracking. It's much more expensive. It makes much more pollution. We also export a lot of gas now nationally, and that's put prices up. So gas is no longer cheap, and it's no longer clean. And one of the other changes that's happened, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail, is that the technology of electric appliances has also improved a lot, and modern electrical appliances for heating and cooking and hot water are much more efficient and work much better than the old ones that, some of us remember from houses that we used to live in. I've said a few times hot water, heating and cooking. That's because, well, they're the three things that most households use gas for. You don't normally use gas for any other things, though, there are gas lights and there are gas tumble dryers and that, but generally hot water, heating and cooking is what we're used to using gas for. And they all can also be done with electricity. But the other reason is that heating and hot water, especially in Victoria, are the two biggest uses of energy in the house. And this chart is pretty average. It depends a lot on what sort of appliances you got, whether you got pools and that sort of stuff. But so the average house in Melbourne, you use about half your energy just for heating and almost a third for hot water. So altogether, you've got probably more than 2/3. Is it more than 2/3? 45, 55, 65. Yeah, more than 2/3 of energy the typical home uses just on heating and hot water. That's huge. So shifting that from gas to electricity makes a big difference, especially if it's cheaper. Is it cheaper? Good question, because a lot of us who grew up in Melbourne have this belief that gas is cheaper and electricity is more expensive. And I'm going to try and pop a pin in that balloon right now. And look, it did used to be the case. It did used to be cheaper to heat water in your house with gas and electricity, and it's no longer the case. Renew has done a lot of analysis of household fuel costs, because Renew is an organisation that's aim is to help households use energy more sustainably and effectively. This is the most recent sort of full fuel choice study that we did for all of Australia, or most of Australia. And really, we found that, yeah, sometimes these efficient electric appliances cost a bit more upfront. It's actually not as much the case as it is now as it was when we did that report in 2018, because prices have come down, a lot of these appliances. But they do lead to lower energy bills. So even if they are a bit more upfront to buy, you actually save over the life of the appliance by much lower energy costs. And it's worth remembering that one of the benefits of not having a gas connection and being all electric is that you don't pay that daily or monthly service fee for the gas bill. You know how your electricity bill and your gas bill both have that daily charge, which is often between 70 cents and $1 a day. It's like the fixed charge. It's listed separately on the bill. You pay it no matter how much you use. If you don't have a gas bill, you're actually saving about 3,000 or about 300 a year just by not having that fixed cost. That's even not counting any of your energy usage. So that's one of the things we found that helps to make a single fuel a lot more cheaper for a household than having the double fuel. We also did a bit of a smaller study that was a bit less comprehensive, but that was more forward looking. This was from last year. And we did this because of the changes that happened last year where energy prices started getting a lot more expensive a lot quicker. You're probably very well aware of that. I certainly am. My bills have gone up quite a bit. And yeah, this study found that, while, yes, household energy costs are basically going to be higher at the end of the decade than they were at the start, which is actually against trend a bit because prices were coming down before this, that while all of our energy costs are going up, our modelling found that dual fuel homes, those with both gas and electricity, will have higher increases over that period than the all electric homes, partly because it's, like I said before, it's overall cheaper to just use electricity and gas, but also because gas in the long run is going up, will go up more than electricity over that period. If you've got solar, you're best off. You have the lowest price increases if you've got solar as well, because you get a whole lot of electricity basically free. But important point, all electric is beneficial economically even without solar. Solar just makes it extra beneficial. The other thing is, and we looked into this in this report, is that actually improving the thermal efficiency of your home further reduces your cost quite a bit. And that's a really important point, anything to do with energy. In the end, how much energy you use for things makes how much it costs. And if you improve the thermal efficiency of your home by draft proofing, making sure you've got enough ceiling insulation and using, heavy drapes on your windows to help insulate, stopping losing hot air from inside the house during winter through the glass, that really helps reduce your costs. And it has a multiplying effect because it reduces your usage. So when you make your per kilowatt hour usage cheaper, then that has a multiplying effect if you're also using less electricity. But now I want to go into the costing because there's a bit of misinformation about cost. And the gas companies who, obviously don't want everybody to stop using gas, they often say, well, gas is cheaper than electricity. And in one sense, if you just look at the raw prices, it certainly looks like it. I looked at my bills here because I've had both gas and electricity. In my house, gas is like 3.5 cents a unit and electricity is about 23 cents a unit. As the graph shows, that's just cents up the side, and that's electricity, that's gas. Gas is a lot lower per unit, but of course, they're in different units. Gas is measured in megajoules, electricity is measured in kilowatt hours. And there's actually 3.6 megajoules in every kilowatt hour. So you need to actually convert them to the same usage to, compare the price. The same as like, if you measure one thing in, kilograms and another thing in pounds, the numbers will be different, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not, the numbers won't actually reflect the true difference because the units are different. So if we convert gas to kilowatt hours as well, so we measure them both in the same units, gas is still about half the cost of electricity per kilowatt hour. The same energy value of gas costs half as much as that same energy value of electricity, which again, that would quite reasonably make you think, well, gas is still cheaper. But here's the kicker. We don't get gas or electricity for their own sake. We get them for what they can do for us. We get electricity so it can run a heater or run a light. We get gas so it can run a heater or, cook our food. So we really need to look at how efficient the appliances are at using the energy, because what's important to us is not energy in, but energy out. We want the same amount of energy out. And that's when I mentioned before about the improved technology of these electric appliances. Modern electric appliances, heat pump, they're using heat pump technology, reverse cycle air conditioners for heating, and heat pump hot water systems for hot water. They are far more efficient than the gas systems. Here's two examples. Gas ducted heating is between 50 and 80% efficient. That means for every, 100 units of energy that goes in, you get between 50 and 80 out in hot air. And that depends on what condition the ducts are in, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas a reverse cycle air conditioner is 450% efficient. You actually get more heat energy out of it than electrical energy that goes into it. And that sounds like it goes against, those laws of physics. And I'll explain in a few slides why it doesn't. But for now, just take at face value that the heat pumps actually produce more energy than the electricity that goes into, because they also pull energy from the ambient air around us. So look, on average, let's say a good conditioned gas ducted system is about 80% efficient. A typical reverse cycle air conditioner is 450% efficient, which is about 5 times more efficient. That means it uses 5 times less electricity to produce the same heat as the gas heater uses in gas. And when you compare that efficiency, you can actually see that you get far more, it's far cheaper. This is cents per energy out of the appliance. You get far fewer cents for electricity than gas for the same amount of heating. It's pretty similar for heating as for hot water. This is basically how many cents per unit of energy out. The efficiency of the modern heat pump electric appliances basically means that you use so much less electricity, you use so much less energy to run them, that it's cheaper, even though the electricity is a bit more expensive. I hope that's not too confusing, but I'll explain a bit more how the appliances work in a bit more detail in a second. I just want to move on to the emissions picture, because a lot of people are concerned about the emissions, especially because we know that a lot of electricity is made by burning coal or gas. And we were told that gas is quite low emission, and we know that coal is quite high emissions. And look, one thing is, the electricity grid in Victoria is not just coal. We have a fair bit of gas, which is low emission. That's what I mean by that is we actually use gas to generate electricity, not just, we also use gas in our homes, but gas is used to make electricity. And we have quite a bit of gas electricity generation. We also have a fair bit of solar and wind in Victoria. Excuse me. That's not just solar on people's rooftops, but also large-scale solar farms. Still, if you look at the emissions factors, and this is basically how much emissions are in the electricity grid and the gas grid in Victoria. This chart is for each state. And in Victoria, we've got, the dirtiest electricity grid. And you can see that this is basically a measure of how much emissions in the electricity grid and the gas grid. So you can actually see that in Victoria, our electricity grid is 4.6 times more dirty, more emissions than our gas grid. So again, that does make it quite look like, we're going to use a lot more emissions if we're using electricity instead of gas. But again, the same factor comes into it, the efficiency of the appliances. The reverse cycle air conditioner uses 5.6 times less energy than the gas heater that it replaces. The heat pump hot water system uses 5 times less energy than the gas instant hot water system that it replaces. And so 5 times that actually outweighs the 4.6 times, right? You use 5 times less electricity. So because you're using so much less, you actually are producing less emissions than if you're using the gas one. And this is sort of borne out by this study that we did about 4 years ago, again, looking over most of Australia and we modeled the energy usage of the whole house appliances, all the appliances that could be either gas or electric, and compared, looked at the emissions, looked at the energy usage of the appliances, looked at the emissions of whatever state They were in and measured what's the emissions across a year for these houses if they have gas appliances or electric appliances. And again, we found that in most places in Australia, the house that has gas appliances actually generates more emissions than a house with electric appliances. So here's Melbourne. It's a bit less. It's not heaps less, but it's definitely less. Most places in Victoria, it's actually a bit more of a gap than Melbourne. The only places in Australia where the all-electric home is more emissions is in places that are very hot and don't really use any heating. So Mildura in Victoria, they're about even. Brisbane, it's more emissions to be all-electric because you don't really use your heater. But for most of us in Victoria, right now in 2023, that's right, yep, electric home on average has less emissions than a gas home, even though our electricity grid has more emissions than our gas grid, and that's because the all-electric homes use less energy. But also, that's just now. In fact, this research was 2019, so it's a few years ago. But things are changing, right? Gas is actually getting dirtier because as those oil wells dry up, and they're the easiest and less emissions-intensive ways to get gas, we're getting more and more gas from what they call unconventional gas, where you extract it from the ground, coal seams or fracking, creates heaps of wastewater, emits much more greenhouse gases, and also is piped a lot longer distance. And there's gas leaks in pipes that also create emissions. So every year gas is a bit more emissions than the year before, and also getting more expensive because, as I mentioned, a link to international markets. And electricity supply is actually getting cleaner. I mentioned already about solar and wind that is lowering the emissions of our electricity grid. Every year there's more of these renewable generators and there's more solar panels on people's roofs, which are part of the energy system. And our energy supply in Victoria already is around 30% renewable on average over the year. And that's a lot more than it was even a few years ago. And it's just going to keep getting more as more and more of those systems are built. And by 2030, our grid is projected to emit about a third as much as it does now. And that's a huge change. So if we go back to this chart, this is 2022. I did this with 2022 figures, which are the latest figures from the greenhouse accounts. That's 2022 for each of those states. In 2030, it looks like this, and this will blow your mind. That's how much the emissions of electricity grid in each state are going down over the next 7 years. And that's because of the increasing growth of renewable energy. So by the time you get to 2030, it doesn't even matter. Even if the electric appliances were using the same amount of energy as the gas appliances, we know that they don't. But even if they were, they'd still be low emission because the emissions are going to drop so much. And that's all part of, we're on this whole national sort of target towards lower and lower emissions. So, and the thing to think about here is that if you're changing an appliance over today, you're still going to have that appliance in 2020, 30. They typically last 10, 15, up to 20 years, those appliances. So when you change an appliance to go all electric, you're not just doing it for now, you're doing it for the life of the appliance. And over the life of the appliance, that electrical appliance will emit fewer and fewer emissions each year because of this change that's happening in the energy grid. That's the quick summary of the cost thing and the emissions thing. I'm now going to talk a bit about the appliances, and this is where I'm going to dig a bit deeper into that weird thing about reverse cycle, about heat pumps producing more energy than they take to run. But I'm going to do a quick go over the evolution of appliances. In the 1960s, these were the modern, cheap, clean appliances. Some of us will have had some of these in houses that we grew up in, or, share houses or whatever. We might still have them in our houses now. These old, what they call resistive electric stoves with an element that gets hot. It's the same technology used inside the old electric hot water system and inside these very groovy looking but not particularly effective heaters. It's called resistive. I might use that term a bit, so I'll explain. The way a resistive electric element works, it's the same as a light bulb, is that you just jam a lot of electricity through a thin wire and it gets hot. That's why, when your phone's charging, it gets hot. Same sort of thing. These these appliances are designed to make heat by forcing electricity through a lot of resistance. That's why they're called resistive. Very effective for making heat, but varying utility. We all know with these old resistive stoves that they take 5 minutes to heat up and then they don't turn down immediately, so you got to take the pot off, and it's a bit of a pain. These heaters are great for making your legs feel warm, but they don't really get you when you step back a couple of meters. So these are the mod cons in the 60s. They're now, we just remember them as being a bit useless, really. 70s through 90s, and now, these were basically the standard appliances over the last few decades. Storage gas hot water system. Now a lot of places have instantaneous gas, which is actually a lot more efficient than the storage ones. Wall furnaces or ducted heating, gas burners. You might still have them. I've got gas burners. We love gas burners. You turn the flame up, it gets hot. We turn it down a bit, it goes down a bit. You turn it down a little bit more. Such fine control. We love it, especially in Victoria. Now you're cooking with gas. That's what we say. And these are the modern electric appliances. Heat pumps, which you recognize these little boxes. That's the heat pump. Heat pump to make heat in an air conditioner. They also make coolness. Heat pump to heat the water in the tank. It's just like the resistive hot water tank or the gas tank, but it's powered by the heat pump. An induction stove, which uses a different type of technology to heat the food. Actually heats the pot itself directly, which heats the food inside of it. And in the induction is like gas for cooking, in that when you turn it down, it lowers the heat straight away. It's as controllable as gas. A lot of chefs are moving over to them because you've got as much control as a good gas burner, but there's additional safety benefits because there's no open flame. Only the pot gets hot. The stove top doesn't really get hot. So some of the cheap ones do because of the way they're built, but they generally don't. You've probably seen ads for induction cooktops where they have a piece of chocolate next to a pot with melted chocolate in it. That's sort of the idea. So it's really this change of technology that makes the difference for all this stuff. How the heat pump works, basically, the electricity that runs it spins a fan and operates a compressor, which is inside that box. The fan sucks air in from outside the house. It forces it through the compressor, and in the compressor, it basically extracts the heat from the air. Cold air gets blown out of that box, but the heat that's sucked out of the air is sent to the air conditioning unit, and then there's a fan in the air conditioning unit that blows it out into your room, makes it warm. And this is why you can get, you put in 1 kilowatt hour of electricity into the heat pump, you get 5 kilowatt hours of heat out. Kilowatt hour is like an amount of energy. If typically it's 1 kilowatt to run the heat pump, puts out 5 kilowatts of heat. You do that for an hour, you've produced 5 kilowatt hours of heat. The thing is that even when it's winter, that cold air still contains heat. That's a little bit of a, hard to get your head around sometimes, but just think about it as in when it's 2 degrees outside, it's really cold, right? But when it's -2 outside, it's a lot colder, right? That means there's still heat in the air because 2 has more heat in it than -2. And although we feel it as cold, there's actually heat in air, down to basically -273. -273 degrees Celsius is when there's no heat in the air. And as soon as you're warmer than -273, then there's some heat in the air. Some people say that, reverse cycle air conditioners don't work as heaters in cold climates. They totally do, as long as they're not really terrible quality ones. Like anything, you need to get a half decent one. The heat pumps are really common heating in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is a lot colder than Australia. So yeah, they basically, the difference is, they pull that heat out of the air, and that's the extra energy that goes into it. So really into this is, kilowatt hour of energy from electricity and, several kilowatt hours of energy as heat from the air. That's what creates the heat. Reverse cycle, they heat and they cool. The way air conditioners work and fridges is exactly the reverse of this. They just take the cold air in and they uncompress it, and that produces heat that they take out, something like that. I'm not a technologist, but it's basically a fridge in reverse, an air conditioner in reverse. That's why it's called reverse cycle. So that's basically how it works. Now, thinking about the appliances, because people often ask, okay, if they're going all electric, what are the appliances? What are the differences? So I'll start with hot water. The efficient hot water systems use a heat pump just like a reverse cycle air conditioner. There are two types generally. Some have the compressor built into the tank, so it's a single unit like that. Others have a separate one mounted on the ground next to it, just like the box that you see for an air conditioner. And they're a storage unit, just like a gas storage unit. There's a particular volume of hot water. They heat it, and the tank's insulated. It stays hot for quite a while. And you use it as mains pressure. You use it when you have a shower, turn on the tap. So it's really exactly the same as your gas storage hot water system. Just like gas ones, the modern ones are more efficient than the older ones. They have good fast recovery if you use up all the water, and as we learn from our gas hot water systems, you've got to get the right size for your household. Otherwise, you run out of water. That's the same for these. So yeah, if you're shopping for one, do make sure it's the right size for your household. They normally scale them according to how many rooms a house has. It's usually a good idea to scale them according to how many bedrooms a house has, even if there's fewer people living in the house, because, if you sell a house and people move in who've got more people, it's still going to be the right size for them if your family expands, etc. So yeah, that's generally the guide. If you're considering changing your hot water system to a heat pump, it's really important to be prepared, because often when your old hot water system, we normally say with this going all electric that, wait till the appliance breaks down. That's the right time to buy the new one, because you already need to spend the money anyway to buy a new appliance. Why not get the electric one? That's usually what we recommend. With the heat pump, the only problem with that is that when your hot water system breaks down, you usually want it replaced as soon as possible, preferably the same day, maybe the next day. Nobody wants to go a week or two without hot water. But unfortunately, because gas hot water systems are still sort of the norm, a lot of plumbers who come to repair your hot water system, they'll probably have a gas replacement unit in their truck already, but they almost definitely won't have a heat pump. You might need to order it. You might need to wait a couple of weeks for it to come through. I've spoken to quite a few people in our energy advice service at Renew who really wanted a heat pump hot water system. And then when the hot water system broke down, they were faced with a very difficult choice of, do we go 2 or 3 weeks without hot water, or do we get a new gas one? And they got the new gas one because, no one wants to go 2 or 3 weeks without hot water. So do be prepared. Figure out what model you want to get beforehand. Find out where to get it. Find out as much as you can about, if I wanted to buy one of these off the cuff, how long would it take to get it in stock, so you'll be prepared. It's a pretty sensible idea, actually, if you're really serious about doing this change, to think about sort of, being a bit proactive maybe, and, get one when your hot water system maybe hasn't quite broken down yet, but is getting really old. If your hot water system's still working, you might find you can sell it secondhand for a bit of money. Someone else might get some use out of it. And that way, if it takes a few weeks to get your right heat pump in, and if you wanted to spend some time figuring out the best model to buy, then you're able to do it. So do recommend that. It's really good advice for most things. It's probably better to replace your car before it breaks down and leaves you stranded somewhere as well, isn't it? But yes, be prepared for hot water, because yeah, it's better. It's hard to get them quickly, and a lot of plumbers don't know that much about them yet. Some people ask about the other type of electric hot water system, electric instantaneous, like gas. A lot of us are used to gas instantaneous systems where they don't have a tank. They just heat the water up when you use it. It's always hot. We don't generally recommend electric instantaneous systems. They're quite expensive. They're not heat pumps. They're resistive. They use that force electricity through a narrow wire sort of approach. They need a dedicated high capacity circuit. And you heat the water when you use it, so it's unlikely to align with your solar generation if you've got solar. One of the benefits you can have with solar is to make your hot water heat up while your solar is generating, so that you use free energy. You can't really do that with instantaneous. So that's just our thoughts on instantaneous. Heat pumps use the least electricity. They use so little that you don't even have to worry that much about whether they're operating when your solar's on or not, if you've got solar. The other things to think about, and look, a lot of them are the same for any appliance. Probably avoid the cheapest brands because they're not as good usually. They might not be as reliable. They might make more noise, which can make it annoying or even difficult to find the right place to install it if you're close to neighbors. The spec sheets for these hot water systems have a noise, like a decibel rating of the noise that they make. So that's good to keep in mind, and yeah, good to the slightly more expensive ones usually make less noise. We've sort of found that the middle of the road sort of ones, not the cheapest, not the most expensive, are quite good. The really expensive ones are a bit more efficient, but we actually found in our modeling that, you know, the extra cost of the more expensive ones sort of undid the financial benefit of the efficiency, and the environmental impact was not that much difference because they don't use that much energy anyway. And in fact, some of the cheaper ones, some of the middle price ones that were a bit less efficient than the expensive ones were actually more efficient in colder weather. But yeah, have a look around, look at the specs, get recommendations from people who've got them, use a reputable installer and someone who knows heat pump hot water systems. Try and find one. Again, ask people who've got them. You can look at the coefficient of performance, or COP, is just a measure of how efficient they are. The higher the number, the more efficient. So when you're shopping for different models, compare that. But you know, they I'm not sure if they have the star rating. I think hot water systems don't have that star rating. So the COP number is the best one to look for to see how efficient it is. And yeah, I said low noise. There's different refrigerant gases. CO2, ironically, is the least harmful as a greenhouse gas compared to other refrigerants. And some of the more expensive ones use CO2, and one or two of the mid-price ones. But there's a whole lot of information online to look at different refrigerants and what their greenhouse impact is. But there's a measure called global warming potential, which they're all rated for, and different refrigerants are rated for their global warming potential. So, you know, and that really affects, you know, when you dispose of the refrigerant is contained within the system. When you dispose of it, it might leak out. So it's really an issue for when you dispose of it at the end of life. Yeah, if you really want to minimize the environmental footprint, look for the low global warming potential refrigerants. I spent a bit of time on heat pumps because they're the sort of new one that most people haven't had much experience with. Reverse cycle air cons, a lot of us familiar. A lot of us have them in our houses already. Look, if you're replacing ducted gas system with reverse cycle air cons, you normally need a few of the reverse cycle units spread through the house. If your house is not well insulated, you might find it hard to keep warm. Ducted gas actually works well to keep a poorly insulated house warm because you've got heat coming in every room, but it's very expensive because you lose a lot of heat through the ceiling. So it's a mixed blessing. If you get your insulation good and you know, stop as many drafts as you can, you'll find that if you have a few reverse cycle air conditioners sort of strategically located around the house, that the air temperature equalizes within the house because it's insulated and the whole house will be warm. And typically people use a large one in a living area, smaller ones either in bedrooms or maybe in a corridor outside a couple of bedrooms. Some people are sensitive to the draft because they blow the air with a fan. So you can actually set the fan speed quite low. You can also set the louvers to make the air come out sort of high. It still circulates down through the house. Air cons have the star rating system that appliance efficiency sticker. So look for the highest ones. Generally, you know, high star rating will be more cheaper to run. Basically, the star rating normally says how much electricity they use in a typical house in a year. Ducted systems, you can get heat pump ducted systems, or reverse cycle heat pump ducted heating and cooling systems. They're generally less efficient because the ducts, you actually lose heat in the whole ducting and everything. So ducted systems are less efficient. We would normally recommend a bit against them, but some people really like having ducts and heat every room. So if you like having ducts and heat in every room, just be aware that they're less efficient because of the ducts, and you might need new ducts if you're replacing a gas ducted system because they might need to be different size. Again, look for a good installer, look for a good refrigerant if you've got some choice, and low noise. There's a few different types here. Like, it's not just the thing stuck on the wall. You can put them inside a sort of casing like this, so they look a bit more like part of your house. That's just inside there with vents going to the outside. You can get floor level units that are more like heaters, but they're not that common in Australia, so they probably cost a bit more. You can also get a multi-split system where you have, a few units run by one bigger compressor. That sort of works for especially if you've got limited outdoor space to put the compressor. But again, the multi-split systems tend to be a bit less efficient just because of the way they work and, the limited ability to, the way that it works to let you operate the different units at different levels. So yeah, again, might be the right solution for you, but generally we find separate systems is generally the simplest, more efficient way to go. And, the units can go on the roof, on the wall, on the ground. There's a few choices for that. Sometimes a couple of multi-splits with two works well because, again, you limit the outdoor space for the units, but you've got the indoor units where you need them. I mentioned a bit already about induction. There's a picture with the chocolate, right? So they are very different to the old-fashioned electric ones. You've got immediate control over the temperature, just heats the pot. Some cookware doesn't work with it, like aluminium is the most common that doesn't work with it. I think copper also doesn't work with it. And some of the cheapest stainless steel ones has so little sort of iron in the steel that they don't work. The easiest way to tell is to stick a fridge magnet on your pot. If the magnet sticks, the induction will work. That means there's enough sort of iron content in the metal to work. Check reviews, like buying anything. Like, there's a lot of brands out there. It's still a fairly new area. A lot of the mid-price ones are very good. Check reviews, ask people that have got them. They have different ways of controlling them. Try them out in the store if you can and see which one works for you. Another big benefit of induction, of course, is there's no indoor air pollution because there is air pollution inside the house from burning gas. It's something that we've become aware of sort of more recently. There's been some studies, some scientific studies in the last few years that actually have suggested there may be a link with childhood asthma and a lot of gas cooking inside the house. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you've got some respiratory issues. That's probably a more important issue. You can deal with some of that issue by having a really good fan, sort of over stovetop sort of fan type unit. The other thing with induction is that you'll usually need a dedicated circuit on your switchboard with a higher power, because although they don't use that much electricity overall, they do draw high amounts for short periods of time. So you might need to upgrade your switchboard for that. You may already have a dedicated circuit if you've got an electric oven. Electric ovens often have a dedicated circuit already. My place does. I've got a gas cooktop and an electric oven, and it's got a dedicated circuit as well. So you might have that. But good to find out before you do it so that you know what you're in for. Some houses might need more of a switchboard upgrade than others. How to go about it? Well, there are some, you can get some financial assistance from a few government programs, Victorian government programs. The Victorian Energy Upgrades program can give you some rebates for replacing inefficient heating with more efficient ones. Depends a bit on what you're replacing and what you're replacing it with. I believe that the government is in the process of developing a new rebate program specifically about upgrading heaters to reverse cycle, but I think it's not ready yet, but I may be slightly out of date with that. So Google stuff for the Victorian government energy website has a lot of information about this stuff. If you look up Victorian government heating rebates or subsidies, you'll find the information. Always find out if there's a rebate that can help, because it doesn't hurt. It's always nice to save money. There is also a rebate for solar or heat pump hot water systems through the Solar Victoria program. It's up to $1,000 off. So again, check out that on Solar Victoria's website. There's a link down there to see that. But these rebates, they help with the changeover cost, but the modeling that we did at Renew, we didn't factor in these rebates. We just worked out if you're paying upfront full cost, there's still a clear benefit because of the lower energy usage. How to go about it, like I said before, for most people, do gradually. When your appliance wears out, replace it. Try to replace the gas hot water system before it finally dies, because, like I said, that's a pain and can be difficult. to get a heat pump hot water system quickly. But, if you feel like it's about time to replace your heating or your hot water, that's a good time to consider electric and get electric instead of a gas, save money, even if it costs a bit more upfront than some of them do, because gas is still more popular in Victoria, so gas appliances are sort of often a bit cheaper than the modern electric ones, but you will find that you will save money over time. And our modelling was all based on actual retail pricing and installation, so we did factor in that the gas appliances are often cheaper. There's still a benefit because of the huge energy savings, which are multiplied by the fact that gas is becoming more expensive faster than electricity is. I already mentioned checking your electric switchboard. If is there enough space for a couple of new circuits? If you need some new circuits, all houses are different. You might need to talk to an electrician about that. Is there space to put the external units for heat pumps along the wall or on the roof or on the ground? I also mentioned, if you've only got one gas appliance, it's always worth replacing it immediately, even if it still works fine, because when you replace your last gas appliance, you not only save the energy usage cost, but you also save that fixed cost of having the connection. And that makes a huge difference. And some of the modeling we did is that if you've just got a cooktop left, the gas cooktop, and you've already got electric hot water, electric heating, just the cooktop is costing you more in that fixed cost than it costs to run usually. So that's a big saving for that. If you're not sure, if you've got a reverse cycle air conditioner, just try it out. When it's cold next, instead of turning on your gas heating, try using the heating on your air conditioner and see how it goes. It's not going to heat the whole house like a ducted system. Like I said, you'd normally have a few reverse cycle air cons through the house if you're going to heat the whole house with heat pumps, but just try it in your living room. This in-between season is a good time to do the experiment because it's not as cold as the middle of winter. We might just need to heat the room that we're sitting in watching TV, not the whole house. So it's a good way to try it out and see what it's like. Play around with the settings, find out how it works. Unless your system's super old, it's gonna heat the room if it's the right size for it, and it's going to be cheaper to run. We did some modeling on this. I think it was just heating one room with either a gas wall furnace or a reverse cycle air conditioner of average efficiency, and I think it was $200 cheaper for a year just to use the existing reverse cycle air conditioning over the existing gas heater. If you're building a new home or doing like a major reno, our modeling showed that the biggest benefit came from when you were building a house from new. Meet the current efficiency standards, lots of insulation, which is already lower energy usage, and it's far more cost effective to have no gas, to have all electric appliances. The benefits were huge. They're all in the report. It's on our website. And that good thermal performance really helps. For a new home, aiming, I think the new building standard that's coming in is 7 stars, but we certainly found the sweet spot is sort of 7 or 8 stars. The cost of a bit more thermal efficiency is outweighed by the energy savings, and until you're going absolutely super incredible thermal efficiency like 9 or 10 stars ends up being a lot more expensive to do the last bit. It's pretty easy to get 7 stars very cost effectively in a new home. It's well insulated, there's no drafts. Your heating and cooling doesn't need much energy because the temperature in the house is quite stable even without heating and cooling, because it just retains the heat and it keeps the heat or cold out. In old homes, it's pretty hard to get as high as 7 stars, but you can still get quite a few benefits from insulating and draft proofing. The house I live in is like a 1940s house. It's had like a reno in the 1970s. It's not particularly well sealed. It's got almost but not complete ceiling insulation. And I've done a bit of draft proofing to it, and it still performs pretty well with good, and mainly because it's got the good ceiling insulation. So that's worth keeping in mind. This is some more recent analysis done by the Climate Council. Look, it's different for every house. I hesitate to say you will save this much money by going electric, because it so depends on how you use energy, how big your house is, what appliances you've got, when you're in, when you're out. But the Climate Council did look at sort of typical houses, and they were going like, in Melbourne, conservative estimate, about $1,200 a year better off if you're all electric than if you're dual fuel because of the energy savings. And that figure is really just going to get more because of the higher cost of energy over the next few years. Getting near the end, so timing is looking okay. I want to touch on solar panels. Some people think that it's not worth going electric unless you've got solar. It's not really true. Certainly it's better with solar. It's almost the other way around. If you've got solar, it's a real no-brainer to go all electric because you can't replace your gas usage with the free energy that you generate with your solar panels, but you can replace your electricity usage with it. So solar really enhances the benefits of getting off gas. If you're going to be in the house for the next 5 years or expect to be, and you got good sun on your roof, then it's very economically good to get solar. The payback time is pretty short in those sort of conditions. If you can move more appliances to run during the solar generation period, you get the biggest benefit. And you can do that with storage hot water. You can do it with modern dishwashers, washing machines that have timers. You can set them ready to go, and they go off during the day when the solar's shining and generate with sunshine, solar's generating, use your free electricity. Home batteries, look, they're getting a bit more cost effective, but they're still batteries are still quite expensive, and they really just have the effect of making the payback period on your solar a bit longer. They'll give you lower bills, but they'll add to your overall cost for a period of time because of the high upfront costs. I've been doing some modeling on batteries. In some situations, a battery will have a positive payback after 10 years, which is sort of life battery. So they're getting better, but still it's more effective to just shift your loads in the middle of the day, use your appliances there. If you want to get a battery, go for it. It helps the energy system as a whole, and you will get lower bills, but you don't need batteries to benefit from your solar. And solar has a great environmental benefit because it puts all that zero emission energy into the system. You use it, and whatever you don't use, it's used by your neighbors. So you help to expand the amount of zero emission energy in the system. And there's still a good rebate in Victoria. I think it's about $1,400 discount on a solar system. Landlords can get it too, and you can get an interest-free loan through the Solar Victoria program. Victorian government does, so that's a good benefit if you're looking at getting solar. And this is actually some modelling that the Vic government did that just shows electricity bill for a dual fuel home with gas appliances, no solar. That's what is it? It's $3,200 or something a year for their energy. They save $500 by going all electric with a ducted air conditioner system, but they save $1,000 by going all electric with split systems. And if you've got solar, well, it's cheaper for the gas people. That's already a lot cheaper. But if you've got solar and all electric, you save even more. So this is a good illustration of, all electric is a clear benefit. Yes, it's more if you've got solar, but it's still a clear benefit if you don't have solar. The numbers are different to the numbers before because every modeling done in this uses different assumptions, and I haven't tried to make them all the same. It's a really specific number's inaccurate because it's different for everybody. If you're going off gas, a few things. You need to close the account so that you don't have to pay that daily charge. So you have to close the account with your gas retailer. You might, that's like, Origin or AGL or PowerShop or whoever. You might also have to speak to your gas network provider, which is, you might not know who your gas network provider is. In the western suburbs, it's mostly AusNet. But the service difficulties and faults number on your gas bill says who your gas network provider is. They're the ones who do the connection, and they're the ones who own the pipes that send the gas to your home. There might be a fee for closing your account. And you might need to push a bit to close off an account because they don't like you to close your account. But push. Some people have done it by trying to switch retailers, then cancelling a new contract. I think if you just talk to your retailer and just insist that you want to close the account, talk to your gas network provider if you need to, and insist that you want to close it, you'll eventually get through. If they're unhelpful, call the Energy Ombudsman and they'll help you. You don't have to get the gas meter removed and the pipes removed. That's called abolishment, and I left out a little quote mark there. But there's a fee to have it removed, so you can just close your account and leave everything there. In the end, it's probably more it's probably safer to have the connection removed. A lot of people like to remove it so they don't have, the gas meter there, and they can do stuff with their landscaping. It can be quite expensive to abolishment. Like closing the account, it really only costs, $30 or $40 usually, but abolishment could cost between $500 and $1,000 because they would have come and they got to disconnect it from the mains and to get the pipe and stuff like this. Recently, the Australian Energy Regulator introduced a capped fee in Victoria for abolishment of $220. They decided that it needed to be a clear amount of money and that some of the costs should be sort of soaked up by the network. So abolishment now in Victoria is cheaper than it used to be. So it's a good time to go and get enough gas, cut my pipe, take me completely off the network. They will try to talk you out of it. They'll say, oh, if you sell, it'll be worth more if you're on gas. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It certainly used to be true, but I don't know if it's true anymore because there's such a movement towards getting off gas at the moment that, probably isn't anymore. And, all electric, the fuel we use in our home is not just our cooking and our heating and lights and stuff. We use a lot of fuel in our car. So if you really want to go all electric, think about a transition plan to go to an e-car or e-bike as well. The Victorian government's subsidy for electric vehicles recently ended, but there's still a registration discount. There's also a road user charge. Of course, you save a lot of money from petrol, which contains a quite high road user charge in itself. So swings and roundabouts a bit, but it's generally cheaper to run an EV than a petrol vehicle as well, so long as you can charge it from your home at least some of the time. That would depend on if you have off-road parking, basically. There's a whole other topic on electric cars, which we can't go into now. Look, a few other things to consider. Which really a few alternatives. I was going to skim through these really quickly because it's time for our Q&A. Resistive electric hot water, the old-fashioned type, can work well if you've got heaps of solar, way more than you need, because you can just use it in the middle of the day to heat out your resistive hot water tank instead of just exporting to the grid. So that's the thing that some people do. It can be more cost effective, but really only if you've got crap loads of solar that generates heat electricity that you don't need. Then it doesn't matter that those heaters are quite inefficient because you're not using electricity anyway, and it's just going to waste. Solar thermal hot water, which is those ones you've seen on your roof. Look, the sun heats the water. It's different to solar panels. It uses the sun, but the sun heats the water directly. Usually boosted with gas or an electric element. Look, these are actually quite expensive. They're probably more expensive than a lot of heat pumps. And the market is sort of shrinking because it ends up being more cost effective to just have a whole lot of solar panels and then use some of them to run an electric hot water system. But, these are an option. They actually make more sense in much hotter climates than ours. In Victoria, you need to boost them a fair bit especially during the colder months. And you probably end up using as much electricity as a heat pump in the boost-in. So they're not necessarily an energy saver in Victoria, but it depends a bit, and they are an option. So just put it out there. You need to do some detailed modeling to figure out, the relative benefit of a thermal solar and a heat pump in your specific situation. But generally, as far as I can tell, a heat pump is not really going to cost you any more to run than a solar hot water system, and you save more space on your roof for solar panels or other stuff. And yeah, so that's my view. Evaporative cooling is a bit common in Victoria. Look, this is actually relatively cheap to run. It's cheaper to run than a reverse cycle air conditioner, but it uses a heap of water, 10 to 20 litres per hour. They're ducted. It can cost a lot more to run if the ducts are in poor condition. You can also lose a lot of heat through the ducts in winter. And of course, these can't provide heating. So we generally recommend get reverse cycle air conditioners, use them for cooling, use it for heating. But some people love these and they've already got them. So if you have, I think reverse cycle air conditioners make more sense because it's a multi-purpose appliance. Hydronic, very expensive to run. Overheats your house often if it's well insulated, if your house is well insulated. And it's very difficult to convert these from gas to heat pump because you need different size pipes and everything. So, but you can get heat pump ones, and some people love these hydronics. So if you can, yep, you can get heat pumps, but they're not generally, they're much more expensive to run. There's a few cases where, if you don't have much hot water consumption, instantaneous gas probably is a better bet than a heat pump. If you've got no room for a heat pump, that's probably a good choice for the solar thermal. If you really, really, really want gas cooking, you can basically get a plumber to plumb a gas bottle through your house just for your stove, and use everything else electric. That's my quick summary. If there's an outage, a lot of gas appliances don't work without electricity anyway. And if you've got some backup power, it's helpful. You got a barbecue to cook if there's electricity outage, that can be helpful. But look, generally these days, outages don't happen very often, and they're usually pretty short, especially in the city. So not really such an issue, as much an issue as it used to be. And outages are always frustrating no matter what. There's a whole lot of resources. I think these will go out with the email, so I'll try and get onto the Q&A now. But there are lots of programs that give you information or assistance for these things. We'll make sure they go in the email. And a little quick word out to the Getting Off Gas Toolkit that Renew has produced. It's on their website. It covers a lot of stuff that we covered in this presentation, but goes into more detail. It has some case studies, why, how, etc. And it looks at, how to plan it, how to choose your appliances. Again, a lot more detail in all this stuff. So that's really worth checking out. And with that, I'll go to the end of the presentation. Thank you, so that we've got good time for questions. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks, Dean. I'm a bit of a data nerd, so I really enjoyed the slides on the in real life numbers and not just the apples for apples, the cents per kilowatts and the cents per megajoules, because it's what it's going to turn up on your bill. It's not just those really basic numbers.
Right.
So one of the things I like doing is having a look at the behaviors in my own home with a Power Pal or one of the solar metering, how you can access it on an app or a portal. If you've got solar, you can see your in real life, in real time consumption data on some of these apps. And it's good fun to kind of run around and turn all the lights off or tell the 14-year-old teenager how long the shower was and
absolutely, how
are they consumed.
That's how I figured out that my sound system attached to my TV used heaps of electricity even when it was in standby mode. I used a thing like a Power Pal to find that out. I also found out that my old fridge was really expensive to run, so that made me go, it's worth buying a new fridge. So yeah, they're very useful for that. Yeah,
they're probably one of the first things you can do in your energy efficiency journey is remove great grandmother's Kelvinator fridge from the garage.
Cool, but they're costing you a fortune, and they're
costing you a fortune.
And all those refrigerants are leaking into the air too, so not good. Yeah,
not good. So we've got a couple of questions, and there were a couple that also made it to the chat, and I think our host has kindly replied to most of those. So check the chat for some of the links to some of the things that you've spoken about, Dean. That's they're in there. But one of the things that did get put in there was a mention of the Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Homes.
Yes, great.
It's a great resource. They often put photos up of installs of heat pumps that weren't great or ones that were great. And so you can actually see what you should be expecting from good installs or what to avoid for a bad install. That kind of resource is really helpful for those of us that haven't had one.
He'll also talk about, good experiences they have with certain companies and with different brands. It's really useful. I saw a question before about, what sort of heat pump brands do you recommend? It's like I think Laurie said, we don't generally recommend brands, but check them out. And certainly on that site, people talk about their experiences with different brands. Yeah.
And different local installers, because I think that's the key too.
Totally.
So I'll start at the top with some of these questions. What about any additional considerations for people who live in a block of units, not just for the individual unit, but in places where they might have things like communal hot water? What other things need to be taken into consideration?
Yeah, look, that can be tricky with unit blocks. Like you say, often the hot water is communal and it's sort of very built into how the place is built. Basically, if you're living in units, you often have less options. I guess if you're involved with like the body corporate or owners corporation or whatever, that's probably where you end up making decisions about those shared facilities. And certainly some some unit owners corps are looking at, okay, how can we, maybe get solar to use for shared facilities, and how can we make our units more efficient and stuff like that. So yeah, some of that stuff. And it really does depend a lot. Like I know some people in units have trouble installing heat pumps because they haven't got a place to put the compressors, where the other units do have places, like, they can put them on walls or on a balcony. So it really depends a lot. Those shared, like the bulk hot water systems, which are often gas, I think that's very tricky for people in units because no one really owns it. It's owned, but it's part of the way the building is built. And they're big systems because they serve the whole place. And, it's a huge undertaking to change one of those systems out. I mean, a lot of units have those little resistive electric ones under the sink. And to be honest, for a lot of units, that might be, especially a small unit, maybe one person house, that might actually be the most efficient for them. These are not always, I didn't spend much time on the special cases. In some cases, it's like, I don't use much hot water. I'm not really going to save electricity or money by doing a heat pump because they're generally at least a certain size, and that little resistive thing under the sink, that's probably going to be my best, cheapest form of hot water. It's still electric, so it's still ultimately low emissions. It might be on, cheaper tariff. So, it depends. Yeah. Good luck.
While we're on, yeah, exactly. And get good advice. So if there's an opportunity to get someone from, the plumber that the body corporate uses to come past and have a look, it's always worth investigating. While we're on heat pump hot water services, Jeff asked the question, is it better to go for an integrated or a split heat pump hot water? There's a couple of follow-on questions, but I'll start with that. What is the difference between an integrated and a split heat pump hot water?
Yeah, look, there's pros and cons for each. And look, I'm not an expert on the technology, but advantages of the integrated one include it takes up less space. There's sometimes a bit more efficient because there's less, separated units are connected by pipes where the heat, hot water or the
cables,
heat energy sort of goes. So, so they might be more efficient, but maybe not, because there's a lot of factors that go into it. I would still recommend look into, that figure I mentioned, the COP, the coefficient of performance. That's, in the end, it doesn't matter how the system is made. What's the rating? Is it more efficient than the other one? That's what makes a difference. Look, a disadvantage of integrated can be that, if the compressor stuffs up, maybe the whole unit's got to be replaced instead of just the compressor. That might be a disadvantage. But then sometimes for separate units, when the compressors fails, they need to change anyway. It depends on how the interconnect works. So look, probably best to talk to an installer about, whatever models they're dealing with, to find out then about the benefits, because it's a bit swings and roundabouts. Certainly, yeah, less space with the integrated ones, a bit neater.
Yeah, unless height's a problem. In that case, you might go for a split.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah.
So it's all case dependent. With the coefficient of performance, how do you know, like, how would you judge what's high? Like what a high coefficient would be? Is there a kind of tipping point?
Yeah, probably. I mean, look, the coefficient of performance is like the ratio of energy into energy out. So if it's 4, for example, if the COP is 4, that means for every 1 unit of electricity going in, you get 4 units of heat energy coming out. That's what it means. So a COP of 4 is 400% efficient. I'll be looking at least, 4 or 5. And then, it's a few years ago, I would have gone 4 is pretty good. Now I'd sort of go probably 5 because the technology's improved and there are more efficient ones on the market at a lower price points. But whatever price range you're working within, get the most,
the higher the better
price range. That's the thing. I would go at least. I mean, I'll probably go at least 4.5, to be honest. But it would depend on.
That's a sweet spot
on your price,
depending on the price.
Well, I don't think it's necessary. I think that if you go higher, it might be more. It just depends on the cost. If it's worth going from 4.5 to say 5.5, that'll depend on what's the price premium. Are you going to save that cost of the price premium in the added efficiency? It depends on what the price premium is. For someone, it might be yes, some might be no. You might be more interested in the emissions saving or the energy saving, in that case, you might go for the higher one, even if it's more expensive overall. Yes, so it depends also on what value, on what your priorities are for what you're trying to achieve. But yeah, I'd consider sort of 4.5 is a good minimum to go for.
Great. Jeff's last following question was around what kind of maximum sound, if we're comparing decibels for decibels, what would we consider to be max? Don't go there if it's any higher than that.
Look, good point. And you know what? I actually can't tally because I just haven't got those numbers in my head. Sorry. I would look at a range of appliances from different brands at different price points and see the range that they go. I know there is a figure that there's a minimum they have to get in the standard, and there's rules on how close they can be to a neighbouring room, like of another house, depending on how high that level is. And I just can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Sorry. So I'll just look.
No, that's okay. You've got lots in your head. It's okay that this one isn't in your skill set. That's so fine. Now, Greg asked, he's got a couple of reverse cycle air conditioners, but they've got to be about 20 years old. Are these split systems, and how can I find out?
Well, split system basically means that you've got that rectangular, usually indoor unit, and that compressor outdoor unit. That's a split system. It differentiates from the box air conditioner that, the old-fashioned type ones that you would stick in a window or in a hole in the wall, and they're not split because they have the indoor unit and the outdoor unit joined together. They're sort of integrated like those hot water systems, but they tend to be, they're usually older. There's not that many models made that way these days, and they tend to be lower efficiency. And it's something about the engineering constraints of building the unit, the air conditioner type unit that way. It's different because it's very different engineering than the heat pump ones. So they're a bit less efficient. I know that when we were looking at this in relation to the new standard for rental properties, it's like, those ones only go up to 2 or 3 stars. And if you want to go above 3 stars, you have to get a split system. So it can be a bit hard to find the specs for an old split system. If you Google and you can find them, it might help. And then that's sort of how you decide, is it worth upgrading to a new system? Am I going to get, a new system is probably going to be more efficient than an old one, but how much more efficient? Is it worth it? That's that decision that you got to make about, it's hard to say.
Great, thank you. There's another question around incoming power. And I myself experienced this in my previous 1970s brick veneer when I wanted to change out an electric oven that had the old elements on the top, and I wanted to update to something newer, and the electrician kindly told me I needed to upgrade to a different phase of power because it was quite an old incoming cable. So what do you do when that needs to be upgraded? Like, how do you find that out? And how do we go about getting, a power upgrade if that's what we need?
Yeah, good question. So we're talking about the actual wire in the street. I had that issue with the house I used to live in, actually. We were renting, actually, but we were trying to get a 15 amp circuit put in to run a kiln, and we had to get that cable upgraded. Yeah, some houses have low, I think the one we had a 40 amp cable, and the standard is about 63, I think. One way that you might be able to tell is by looking at the main fuse, the main circuit breaker on your switchboard. The one that's like the main, the switchboard has all your separate circuits in your house, and there's a main one as well.
It has a number on the bottom of it, doesn't it? Yeah,
all the circuit breakers usually have the number of amps that they do, and normally light circuits are 10 amps, and is it light 10 amps? Yeah, I think light circuits are 10 amps and power's 15, and no, 15 is a high power. I can't remember, actually. But yeah, they're different levels, and the main power one would normally say 40 or 63 or whatever. So that's one way to find out. The other way really is just to have an electrician, because, in my house, I could see that fuse was only 40 hours, but when the electrician came out, he's like, that wire is also limited. That's why the house has a lower thing. That's a case you might find with older houses. Most modern houses will have 63 or I think 80 or there's a higher one. It'll all depend. It depends on what other stuff you got there. That's why it's really hard to say it's going to be like this, because it will depend on your house. And some houses have enough capacity and others don't.
Yeah, and I found getting the opinion of a second electrician equally as helpful, because sometimes just so that you can make sure that both stories align with each other.
Well, we say that,
and costs.
And like that, and that's right. That's what we go for. If you're doing anything major, like want to get a new appliance or a solar system, don't just ask one place. Get at least 2 quotes, preferably 3. That'll give you an idea of if they're all in a similar ballpark, then it's a bit more reliable. And if they're wildly different, you got to ask, well, what's going on?
What's different? Yeah. And someone else has asked, are smart circuit boards available and approved for use in Australia?
I'm not sure what you mean by smart circuit boards. If you want to put in the chat or something to clarify that.
Because that's one thing we haven't talked about in the presentation, is that with a lot of the smart home technology now, we can really maximize things like timers on washing machines and dishwashers, and like light bulbs. We've got a 10-year-old in the house that can sit in bed and turn his light on and off from his iPad.
You can operate them remotely.
We can operate things remotely. You can pre-cool your house with your split system, before the peak demand time.
Interestingly, there was a big study done on this a few years ago by Monash Uni, and they found that people who were really invested in this smart home stuff, they didn't usually save energy, but they used it to turn appliances on. Like you say, they used it to say pre-cool, so they didn't necessarily save energy, but they made the house more comfortable for the same amount of energy. So that's still a benefit. And look, you can get stuff like, I've had a thing done on my switchboard, which is not like a smart controller, but it's a smart monitor. An electrician installed on my switchboard. It monitors electricity on all the circuits. It's like connected across to all the circuits, and there's a phone app, and you can go, I'm using this much on that circuit, this much on that circuit. So that's I haven't quite worked out what makes that useful yet, but it can. If your circuits were set up in such a way, that could be sort of useful. There's a lot of this technology is developing. I think that I think there's a lot of systems that are not part of the switchboard, but they might connect into the switchboard that can do a lot more fine-grained sort of monitoring and control of systems. And, I do believe that.
And I think that's what the question was referring to. So the follow-up is that it's about prioritizing where the power goes in your house. So if your stove is using a lot of power, it can cut the power to the hot water if there's too much power being consumed. So, that the ability to kind of shift the load.
Yeah, so this is often called a home energy management system, or HEMS for short. And that it can do a lot of stuff. It's exactly what you're talking about. You can also get ones that go, there's a lot of solar being generated today. Let's, run the pool pump extra and stuff like this. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Again, there's 2 aspects of it. It can save money, or it can give you more amenity and know what you're looking for, because if you get to save money, then you need to make sure, do the maths and go, it's going to cost me this much to install and operate this system. Am I going to save more than that by using the system? Not always the case, right? But if you're doing it for other reasons, then you might be quite happy to not be saving money.
Yeah. I find it really interesting because my parents have installed a home battery with their solar systems, and both my mum and dad separately and together will often sit with their app on their phone, and they know exactly what percentage the battery's charged to and how long that's going to last. And geez, Kelly, it's a bit cloudy today, the battery's only got 53%. And my mum has medication that needs to be stored in a fridge, so on occasions where there might be a blackout, they've set the system up on a dedicated line for the medication fridge in the garage. Right. So, they've created all this system for exactly what they need in their home. But it's fun watching them, really monitor it. And they know, my dad knows he's not allowed to turn the washing machine on, unless the battery's full or unless, the sun's shining. So
totally.
A lot of this is also about, capturing our individual behaviours and our individual needs, and
that's right,
our individual houses. And
so different people have different capacity to do this, and that's why I think ultimately, when appliances are more able to be automated, it's going to work better for more people, right? Because if you're running around like a headless chook trying to get kids ready for school and home from school and to sport and to dinner, you're not going to care about when you turn something on. You're just going to turn it on when you need it, right? So this is actually when more automated controller stuff will actually work better. And I think it's coming in the near future, but we're not really there yet.
Well, that kind of wraps up the formal questions. Like there's a bit of chat in the chat group that's sort of come along, but I don't think there's any specific questions for you that we haven't already covered off. So if there's any last minute questions.
Through the chat questions. So that's good. The link about the VIC energy rebates and programs is there in the chat. Someone asked about smart circuit board, smart electricity meter. Where you're looking, Victoria, we probably almost all have smart electricity meters. It's not the same thing as a smart circuit board, but the smart electricity meter does enable, like it does measure usage very incrementally, like on a time basis. So some energy monitoring equipment will use the smart meter to monitor the energy. Others use different ways to do it. There probably is, I was talking before about the possible, the medium-term future of more control and management of what we call load management, managing loads that might respond to when the house needs stuff done, but also what the electricity system needs, how much solar's been generated, all that sort of stuff. Smart meters could be used. There's some capacity in smart meters to play a role in doing that, but it can also be done through other means as well. Like I've got a home energy monitor that communicates wirelessly with the smart meter to tell you how much you're using right now. But I've also got a power pal, which doesn't actually do that. It just has a little reader and it reads a little red flashing light. It's very analog, but it's the same information because the flashing light shows the electricity going through. So there's more than one way to skin a cat in everything.
There is. And I use the Gemini Outlook portal, which is free because I live in the Gemini area. And I love it because it has my consumption, the bars for how much we've consumed from the grid. And then underneath that, it shows how much we've exported to the grid. And so we know that, we're using this much at nighttime. And then during the day, we're generating more than what we consume. So it's been fun to kind of watch that and understanding on the weekends when we're doing 8 loads of washing, we're a 6-person household. And you can see the grid consumption go up a little bit and
cool.
Cloudy days. So it's just fun to
this is another thing, like, if you do get solar or a battery or solar and a battery, say, even just solar, you normally do get access to some sort of monitoring app that shows you that stuff. So that's, that's also a benefit of getting solar, is that you get this extra eye into it as well.
But even without the solar, the Gemini is quite helpful. And I understand, I think the other distribution businesses, they're going to be having them as well.
Yeah, they all have something similar. Yeah, they work a bit different to each other, but they do all have something that does that. So it is, again, and that's powered by the smart meter. That's a smart meter providing all that data. Smart meters do provide this data that is useful if you know how to get it and if you're interested in getting it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're just about out of time. If you had to leave us with one red hot tip, walk away right now and go and investigate this one thing. And I'm putting you on the spot because you didn't know I was going to ask this question. But what would be your red hot tip, your call to action for the people that have been listening tonight?
The red hot tip for going on electric, can I say a few things? Can I cheat a bit and say a few things?
You've got 3 minutes, you can cheat a bit.
If I was doing a list of a couple of red hot tips, I'd go look at your appliances, look at your hot water system, look at your stove, look at your heater. How old are they?
Take stock.
Understand, because you might not even know until you look. Sometimes people don't even know what sort of hot water system they've got because you don't really need to know. Have a look.
Unless it breaks down. Yeah.
See how old it is. You might have a date on a little panel on the thing. If your hot water system is 20 or 25 years old, I would absolutely start looking for heat pump hot water systems, find out what size would suit your house, figure out if you got room for it, because you need to know that. And really, if a hot water system is that old, I'd be thinking, if you have the money and you can use one of those VIC government rebates to help, I would replace it. Probably if my hot water system is 20 or 25 years old, I'd totally replace it, because it's like that thing is going to crap itself sometime unexpectedly, and it's going to be a bad day when it happens, because if we've ever experienced
and it'll be inconvenient.
We had people go down our street recently and do some work on the gas main. They turned it off and they turned it back on again, and they didn't turn my hot water back on because it's in my backyard. I didn't even know until I think about 2 days or 3 days because the hot water stays hot for quite a
Takes a
while.
while to,
And so a few
cool
days
down.
later, I got in the shower and it was cold. And that's when I knew. And that might be what happens when your hot water system breaks down. You don't even know for a day or two. And then when you know, it's like, it has to be fixed now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you run the bath and it comes out rusty. That was when I noticed. Yeah.
And
all right. Well, that was it.
That
You went, oh, no, here, go.
But the one other thing I go, like a lot of, especially in Victoria, we love to cook with gas. We have a saying about it and everything. Try out an induction cooktop and stovetop and see what it's like at a friend's place, or if you ever, if you go away and stay somewhere that's got one, or you can actually buy them from even at like Aldi for like relatively cheap, little portable ones.
Yeah.
Just try them out, see what they're like. Some places, there are some programs, I think some councils might have this, or some libraries where you can actually hire like a little energy kit that includes I might be thinking of something in New South Wales actually, but I think some councils in New South Wales had a program where you can borrow this sort of kit that includes a portable induction thing. You have it for 2 weeks, and the whole purpose is that you try it out and see what it's like. So that's
it's a one-pot trial. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to go and do that.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
And I've been in this game for 15 years and I still learned some things tonight that I thought I might have already known and very clearly didn't. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for all of our participants who sat in and listened and asked some great questions. The questions reflect that they were really engaged with the presentation tonight. So thanks, Dean.
Yeah.
And everyone look out for your email, the follow-up email that'll have some links and some useful information for follow-up. And of course, you can always email with any further questions. And the Renew website's fantastic. There's lots of links and resources and lots of toolkits. So you guys are certainly a wealth of information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I had a really nice time doing that. So enjoyed chatting with all you people, and thanks for coming.